Hey, welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us. Today, we're looking at something that I think is probably on a lot of people's minds these days, and that's rising home insurance costs in Canada. So we're going to unpack kind of what's really going on behind these increases, how climate change is playing a role, and most importantly, what it all means for you as a homeowner.
Yeah, it's a really important topic and certainly timely. We've got some interesting data from a recent study that was done by MyChoice Financial that really paints a clear picture of how much rates are climbing. And we'll also be taking a look at some information about coverage options that was put together by Good Rates Insurance.
Okay, fantastic. So let's get into it. The My Choice study, this one really caught my eye right away because they say that average home insurance premiums across Canada have jumped over 5% just this year alone. I mean, 5%, we're all feeling the pinch with inflation and everything, but that just seems like a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is significant. You're right. We're all dealing with inflation right now, which is kind of hovering around 1.9%. But you know what's interesting is that home insurance premiums, they're actually outpacing the general inflation rate. And it doesn't look like this is just a one-off spike either. The study shows that in a lot of provinces, people are paying hundreds of dollars more per year compared to what they were paying just a decade ago.
Hundreds of dollars more per year. Wow. So the study breaks down these increases by province, and some of them are even more striking. I mean, Alberta is at a whopping 9.07% increase. Manitoba and BC are both over 5% as well. I mean, those are some pretty serious numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not chump change. And this is where things get really interesting, because the study points to climate change as a major driver of these increases. We've seen just a surge in weather-related insurance claims in recent years. Think about it, major storms, flooding, wildfires, and that cost, unfortunately, is being passed down to homeowners.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling when you look at the numbers, right? Last year alone, insurer losses across Canada totaled something like $8.9 billion. And that was mostly due to all these extreme weather events. It really hits home how climate change is impacting us, right here, right now.
Yeah, and it's not just a Canadian phenomenon. The insurance industry globally is grappling with these rising costs of all these climate-related disasters. You just have to look at California, for instance. Those devastating wildfires, they've pushed insurers to the brink.
I remember reading about that California Fair Plan, which is their state-run insurer. They needed an extra $1 billion just to cover wildfire claims. And that's just one state. It makes you wonder what this means for the future of insurance, especially in the high-risk areas.
Right, and that's the crucial question. These trends are raising a lot of concerns about affordability and even the availability of insurance in the long run, particularly in areas that are increasingly vulnerable to climate change impacts. It's a complex issue with implications that extend far beyond just, the cost of your annual premium.
Yeah, for sure. And so this is where the information from Good Rates Insurance comes in. They point out that while home insurance may not be legally required in Canada, it's often a necessity, especially if you have a mortgage. I mean, it makes sense the lender wants to protect their investment too, right?
Exactly. And Good Rates, they offer a variety of coverage options that are tailored to different needs. They cover everything from standard homeowner policies to condo insurance, tenant insurance, and even policies for rental properties. It seems like they really aim to cater to a wide range of homeowners and their, unique circumstances.
That's good to know, especially with these rising costs and, all these changing climate risks. It seems like understanding your coverage needs is more critical than ever. Yeah. You don't want to be caught off guard, if disaster strikes.
Absolutely. We're seeing a real shift in the insurance landscape, and it's important to be informed and proactive. Now is the time to review your policy and make sure you have the right coverage for your specific situation.
So how can someone even begin to figure out, what they actually need? I mean, insurance can be a bit of a black box for a lot of people. And with all this talk of climate change and rising costs, it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, you're right. It can feel daunting. But I think a good starting point is simply taking a closer look at your current policy.
You mean actually reading that stack of papers that we usually just file away?
Exactly. Dust it off and see what's covered and what's not. Do you have coverage for things like overland water damage, sewer backup, or even wildfire damage? These are things that are becoming increasingly relevant in the face of climate change. I was reading my own policy the other day, and I realized it didn't cover overland water damage. I live in a relatively low-risk area. But it got me thinking about, how these changing weather patterns could impact my coverage needs.
That's a great point. It's easy to assume we're covered for everything,
Yeah.
but the reality is these policies can be pretty specific.
Hmm.
And with climate change kind of throwing us more curveballs, those gaps in coverage, they could become major issues down the road.
Precisely. Imagine the financial strain if your home was damaged in a severe weather event, and then you discovered you weren't adequately covered. It could be devastating.
And this is where taking a proactive approach can make a world of difference.
So let's say someone realizes their current policy isn't really cutting it. What are their options? I mean, is it as simple as just calling up their insurance provider and saying, hey, throw in some extra coverage for, floods and fires?
Well, sometimes it can be that simple, but it's also a good opportunity to explore what other providers are offering. Remember, we mentioned good rates insurance earlier. It might be worth looking into their coverage options. They seem to be quite focused on providing flexible and tailored policies,
Yeah.
which could be helpful in this kind of evolving landscape.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you wouldn't just stick with the first pair of shoes you try on, right? You'd shop around to find the best fit and the best value for you. It seems like the same logic applies to insurance, especially with all these different factors at play. Exactly. And Good Rates seems to have a strong emphasis on customer education, too. They actually break down all these different coverage types on their website, and they do it in a way that's easy to understand. That can be a valuable resource for anyone who feels lost in all the insurance jargon.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people avoid dealing with insurance because it feels so complex and opaque. But having resources that make it more accessible can really empower people to make more informed decisions about their coverage.
Absolutely. It's about taking control of your own risk management,
Yeah.
rather than just hoping for the best. And that's where a company like Good Rates can potentially play a valuable role.
Okay, so we've talked about reviewing our existing policies and exploring different providers. But what about those folks who might be struggling to afford adequate coverage in the first place? I mean, insurance premiums are already a significant expense for a lot of people. And with these rising costs, it's a valid concern for many.
That's a really important point. The affordability of insurance is a growing concern. And it's something that needs to be addressed, on a broader societal level. We need to think about ways to ensure that everyone has access to adequate coverage, regardless of their financial situation.
Yeah, it seems like there's a need for some creative solutions here. Maybe things like government subsidies for high-risk areas, or programs that help lower-income households access affordable coverage.
Those are certainly options worth exploring. And on an individual level, it's important to have open and honest conversations with your insurance provider. They may be able to offer flexible payment options or help you find ways to adjust your coverage to fit your budget.
So it's about finding that balance between protecting yourself financially and making sure you have that safety net in place if something unexpected happens.
Precisely. And remember, it's not just about protecting your physical home, it's about protecting your financial well-being in the long run. Insurance can be a powerful tool for mitigating risk and creating a more secure future for yourself and your family.
This has been really eye-opening. We've talked about the impact of climate change on insurance rates, the importance of reviewing our coverage, and the need to be proactive in finding the right protection. But I think there's a bigger takeaway here that goes beyond just the specifics of insurance policies.
I agree. What stands out to you?
It's this idea of individual responsibility versus collective action. We can all take steps to mitigate our own risks, like making sure we have adequate insurance and preparing our homes for potential hazards. But we also need to acknowledge that climate change is a global issue that requires systemic solutions.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about finding that balance between taking personal responsibility and advocating for larger scale change.
So what does that look like in practice? I mean, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the climate crisis. What can our listener do today to start making a difference?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's easy to feel paralyzed by the scale of the problem. But, I do think there are tangible things we can all do, both in terms of protecting ourselves and pushing for, broader change.
Okay, so what are some practical steps listeners can take?
Well, on an individual level, start by assessing your own risks. Think about the specific climate hazards that are relevant to your area. Are you in a flood zone, a wildfire-prone region? Once you kind of understand those risks, you can start to take steps to mitigate them.
Like what kind of steps are we talking about here?
It could be things like reinforcing your roof, installing flood barriers, or creating defensible space around your home if you're in a wildfire zone. Even something as simple as clearing your gutters regularly can make a difference.
Those are some great tips. And I imagine some of these measures might even help lower your insurance premiums.
That's a good point. Some insurers do offer discounts for homeowners who take proactive steps to mitigate their risks. So it's worth checking with your provider to see what options are available.
And beyond these individual actions, what about pushing for those larger scale solutions you mentioned? Where do we even begin to tackle a problem as big as climate change?
Well, it starts with awareness and engagement. Support policies that promote renewable energy, invest in green infrastructure, and hold our leaders accountable for taking meaningful action on climate change.
So vote for candidates who prioritize climate action, support organizations that are working on climate solutions, and just make our voices heard on this issue.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of individual choices. Reduce your carbon footprint, support sustainable businesses, and talk to your friends and family about the importance of climate action. Every little bit helps.
It's a bit like we were talking about earlier with insurance. We need to balance that personal responsibility with collective action to create a more resilient future.
Precisely. And the good news is there are resources available to help you navigate all of this. We've talked about Good Rates Insurance, and they actually have a ton of helpful information on their website. Not just about coverage options, but also about preparing your home for climate-related risks.
Oh, that's good to know. I'll
Yeah.
definitely have to check that out. It sounds like they're going beyond just selling insurance
Right.
and really trying to empower homeowners with knowledge and resources.
They are. And speaking of resources, they also offer free consultations to help you assess your coverage needs and find the right policy for your situation.
Free consultations. That's amazing. I think a lot of people put off dealing with insurance because it feels so overwhelming, but having access to expert advice can make the whole process so much easier.
It can. And with all the uncertainty surrounding climate change and rising insurance costs, having a knowledgeable guide can really provide peace of mind.
So for our listeners who are feeling a little lost or overwhelmed by all of this, what's the one concrete action they can take today to start moving forward?
I'd say pick up the phone and call Good Rates Insurance. Their number is 647-889-4663. They can answer your questions, walk you through your options, and help you make sure you have the right coverage to protect your home and your financial future. It's a free consultation, so you really have nothing to lose.
That's great advice. Knowledge is power. And having a clear understanding of your insurance needs is the first step toward creating a more secure future for yourself and your family.
Absolutely. And remember, we're all in this together. By taking action individually and collectively, we can build a more resilient and sustainable future for everyone.
Well said. Thanks for diving into this topic with me today. It's been incredibly insightful.
My pleasure. It's always a good reminder that even in the face of challenges, there are things we can do to protect ourselves and make a positive difference.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and empowering. Remember, you're not alone in this. There are resources available to help you navigate these complex issues, so don't hesitate to reach out for support. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.